The autumn semester began like any other, with crisp September air carrying the promise of fresh starts and forgotten dreams. I was 23, pursuing my graduate degree in art history, convinced that beauty existed only in centuries-old paintings and weathered sculptures. How wrong I was. Professor Harrison taught Renaissance studies with the kind of passion that made even the drowsiest student lean forward. She was brilliant, intimidating, and commanded respect with her sharp intellect and unwavering standards. I admired her professionally, nothing more. At least, that's what I told myself before everything changed. It happened during the department's welcome reception, one of those tedious affairs where cheap wine flows as freely as academic pretensions. I stood near the window, nursing my plastic cup of Merlot, watching leaves spiral down from ancient oak trees. The room hummed with conversations about thesis proposals and research grants when she walked in. Time didn't stop, that would be too cliché. If anything, it shifted, like when you suddenly notice a painting's hidden detail that changes everything you thought you understood about the composition. She moved with unconscious grace, wearing a simple black dress that somehow made everyone else look overdressed. Her hair, dark waves cascading past her shoulders, caught the fading sunlight streaming through tall windows. Professor Harrison's voice cut through my reverie. "Lucy, I'd like you to meet my daughter, Sophia. She's visiting from Boston this week." Sophia extended her hand, and when our fingers touched, I felt a tingle in my body. Her grip was firm, confident, and her smile, God, that smile could have launched ships or probably even started wars. Up close, I noticed flecks of gold in her brown eyes, like hidden treasures waiting to be discovered. "Lucy's one of my most promising students," Professor Harrison continued, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in my chest. "She's writing her thesis on the female gaze in Baroque portraiture." "Fascinating," Sophia said, and unlike most people who use that word at academic gatherings, she seemed genuinely interested. "I'd love to hear more about it." Her voice carried a subtle rasp, as if she'd just woken up or had been singing all night. I managed to form coherent sentences about my research, though my mind kept wandering to the way she tilted her head when listening, how she absently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, revealing a small constellation of freckles along her neck. We talked for 20 minutes that felt like seconds. She was a musician, a cellist with the Boston Symphony Orchestra, which explained the elegant strength in her hands. She spoke about music the way I discussed art, with reverence and barely contained excitement. When Professor Harrison called her away to meet other faculty members, I felt her absence like an ache in the chest. That night, I lay awake replaying every word, every gesture, every breath. I told myself it was nothing, just intellectual stimulation combined with too much wine. But deep down, in places I rarely acknowledged, I knew better. Something fundamental had shifted, like tectonic plates grinding against each other, preparing for an earthquake. The next morning brought rain and reality. I sat in Professor Harrison's seminar, trying to focus on her lecture about Caravaggio's use of chiaroscuro, but my thoughts kept drifting to Sophia. Would she visit campus again? Did she feel that connection too, or was I projecting my own loneliness onto a brief, polite conversation? During the break, Professor Harrison mentioned casually that Sophia would be attending the department's Friday lecture series. My heart performed a complicated percussion solo. 3 days. I had 3 days to convince myself this was nothing, that I could attend that lecture and remain completely professional, completely unaffected. I failed spectacularly. Friday arrived wrapped in fog and anticipation. I changed outfits 4 times, finally settling on dark jeans and an emerald sweater that brought out the green in my hazel eyes. Ridiculous, I scolded myself. She probably wouldn't even remember our conversation. But when I entered the lecture hall, her eyes found mine immediately across the crowded room. She smiled, not the polite smile of recognition, but something warmer, more intimate. She'd saved the seat beside her. "I was hoping you'd come," she whispered as I settled in, her breath warm against my ear. The lecture was about Byzantine mosaics, but I absorbed nothing except her presence. The subtle perfume she wore, something with jasmine and sandalwood. The way she leaned slightly toward me when the speaker made a particularly interesting point. How her knee occasionally brushed mine, sending shockwaves through my nervous system. Afterward, she suggested we grab drinks. Unless you have other plans? The vulnerability in her voice, the hint of hope, destroyed any resistance I might have mustered. We found a quiet bar 3 blocks from campus, all exposed brick and dim lighting. Over whiskey sours, our conversation meandered through art, music, travel, books. She'd spent a year in Prague studying with a master cellist. I'd lived in Florence for 6 months, supposedly researching my undergraduate thesis, but mostly getting lost in narrow streets and hidden churches. "What made you choose art history?" she asked, genuinely curious. I considered lying, giving the polished answer I used in interviews. Instead, truth spilled out. When I was 15, I lost my mom to cancer. The only place that made sense afterward was the museum. All those paintings of grief and ecstasy, suffering and joy, they understood what I couldn't articulate. Art became my language when words failed. She grabbed my hand gently, fingers intertwining naturally, inevitably. "Music saved me too," she admitted. "Different reasons, but same result. Sometimes beauty is the only antidote to pain." We stayed until the bar closed, then walked aimlessly through empty streets. The fog had lifted, revealing a scatter of stars. She talked about constellation myths while I watched her face transform with each story, animated and luminous. At the corner where we needed to part, she to her mother's house, me to my cramped studio apartment, we lingered. The air between us crackled with possibility and danger. "I'll be here another week," she said softly. "I know." The weight of that knowledge, the countdown it initiated, pressed against my ribs. She reached up, fingers ghosting along my cheek. "Lucy." "Don't," I whispered, though every cell in my body screamed for her touch. "Your mother, she's my professor. This could ruin everything." "Or create everything," she countered, but dropped her hand. "Good night, Lucy." I watched her disappear into darkness, knowing I was already lost. The weekend stretched before me like an ocean of hours. I attempted normalcy, laundry, groceries, thesis research, but Sophia had colonized my thoughts. I found myself at the library, surrounded by Renaissance texts, but instead of reading about perspective and patronage, I sketched from memory. Her hands, the curve of her throat, that impossibly expressive mouth. Monday's seminar became an exercise in torture. Professor Harrison discussed passion in Bernini's sculptures while I sat 3 feet away, burning with guilt and desire for her daughter. Every mention of ecstasy, every reference to transformation through love felt personal, accusatory. "Lucy, you seem distracted today," Professor Harrison observed after class. "Is everything all right?" "Just working through some thesis challenges," I lied smoothly, though my palms grew damp. She smiled with maternal concern. "Don't push yourself too hard. Breakthroughs come when we least expect them." If only she knew the breakthrough I was desperately trying to avoid. That afternoon, I discovered Sophia in the university's practice rooms. The cello's deep voice drew me like a siren song. I stood outside the door, watching through the small window as she played. Her entire body engaged with the instrument, swaying, breathing, becoming one with the music. The piece was unfamiliar, mournful yet defiant, and I recognized myself in its contradictions. She must have sensed my presence because her eyes opened, finding mine through the glass. She didn't stop playing. Instead, she held my gaze while her bow danced across strings, transforming wood and horsehair into liquid emotion. The music became a confession, a seduction, a promise of everything we couldn't say aloud. When the piece ended, she beckoned me inside. "That was beautiful," I managed, though beautiful felt pathetically inadequate. "I wrote it," she admitted, securing her cello in its case. "This week. It doesn't have a name yet." We both knew what inspired it, who inspired it, but neither dared speak it into existence. I should go, I said, not moving. Should you? She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the pulse fluttering at her throat. Lucy, I leave in 5 days. Can we just exist in this bubble until then? No promises, no declarations, just this. Your mother trusts me, I whispered, my last defense crumbling. My mother doesn't own me. Or you. Her fingertips traced the outline of my hand, not quite touching. I'm 30 years old. You're an adult. We're not doing anything wrong by feeling this. Aren't we? She smiled sadly. Probably. Does that change anything? It didn't. God help me, it didn't. We spent the evening walking through the botanical gardens, talking about everything except the electricity humming between us. She told me about her first cello, a rental that smelled like cigarettes and resignation. I described the first painting that made me cry, Rothko's orange and red meditation that somehow contained every sunset I'd ever witnessed. Do you believe in fate? She asked as we paused beside a fountain, its water catching the last rays of sunlight. I believe in choice, I replied carefully. And consequences. Very academic of you. But her tone held affection, not mockery. I believe in moments. This moment. Tomorrow's moment. Not the grand narrative, just instances of connection. Her phone buzzed. Professor Harrison, wondering when she'd be home for dinner. I should go, Sophia said, but caught my hand as I turned to leave. Tuesday. There's a Baroque concert at the chapel. Would you come with me? I nodded, beyond words, beyond reason. That night, I lay in bed reconstructing every minute detail. How she laughed with her whole body. The way she quoted Rumi and Neruda from memory. Her passionate defense of contemporary composers when I admitted my classical music knowledge ended with Brahms. Each memory became a prayer bead on a rosary of obsession. Tuesday crawled by. I attended lectures without hearing them, took notes that later proved illegible. My fellow graduate students attributed my distraction to thesis stress. If only it were that simple. The concert was exquisite torture. We sat side by side in the chapel's wooden pews, shoulders touching, while Bach's concertos soared through sacred space. Her hand rested on the pew between us, and I spent the entire performance fighting the urge to cover it with mine. During the final movement of Brandenburg No. 5, she shifted slightly, her pinky finger brushing mine. Such a small gesture, yet it reverberated through me like a cymbal crash. Afterward, we walked in comfortable silence until she suddenly stopped. I can't do this, she said, and my heart shattered. Then, I can't pretend I don't want to kiss you every second we're together. Relief and panic flooded through me simultaneously. Sophia, I know all the reasons why we shouldn't. I've cataloged them obsessively. But Lucy, I've never felt this kind of immediate recognition with anyone. Like my soul has been looking for yours without my conscious knowledge. We stood beneath a street lamp, moths circling overhead, the universe holding its breath. 3 more days, I said weakly. 3 more days, she agreed. Then I go back to Boston, back to my life, and you continue here with yours. No harm done. We both knew we were lying, but what else could we do? Wednesday, she texted me a photo of a painting in the University Museum, Waterhouse's Echo and Narcissus. The message read simply, thinking of dangerous reflections. I spent 2 hours crafting a response before deleting it and sending back, beauty that destroys is still beauty. She replied with a musical note emoji and nothing else. That afternoon, I attended Professor Harrison's office hours, needing to discuss my thesis, but mostly testing my ability to appear normal while combusting internally. We reviewed my chapter outline, her brilliant mind dissecting my arguments with surgical precision. You're onto something important here, she said, leaning back in her leather chair. The idea that the male gaze versus female gaze isn't just about who's looking, but about the quality of attention, the difference between possession and witness. Yes, I agreed, thinking of how Sophia looked at me, not like something to be owned, but something to be understood. Speaking of which, Professor Harrison continued, Sophia mentioned you two have been spending time together. I'm glad. She doesn't know many people here, and you have similar sensibilities. My throat constricted. She's wonderful. You must be proud. I am. Her expression softened. She's had a difficult few years. Bad breakup, career pressures. This visit has been good for her. She seems lighter. Guilt gnawed at my insides. This woman had mentored me, supported my academic journey, and I was falling in love with her daughter. The betrayal felt biblical in proportion. Professor Harrison, I began, not sure what confession might follow. Please, Lucy, we've worked together for 2 years. Call me Katherine. But I couldn't. That level of familiarity would make everything worse. I should go. Thank you for your time. I fled her office, her puzzled expression haunting me. That evening, Sophia appeared at my apartment without warning. I opened the door to find her holding a bottle of wine and wearing an expression of determined recklessness. We need to talk, she said. I let her in, my tiny studio suddenly feeling even smaller with her presence filling it. She surveyed the space, books stacked on every surface, art prints covering water-stained walls, my bed unmade in the corner. This is very you, she said with a gentle smile. Chaotic and cramped? Passionate and unpretentious. She set the wine on my desk. Lucy, I need to tell you something. My stomach dropped, preparing for revelation or rejection. The breakup my mother mentioned, it was with a woman named Claire. We were together 5 years. She left me for someone safer. Someone whose love didn't feel like standing at the edge of a cliff. And you think I'm safe? I couldn't hide my bitter laugh. No. She moved closer, close enough that I could feel her warmth. You're the cliff. The fall. The impact. Everything I should run from but can't. 2 more days, I reminded us both. Fuck the countdown. Her voice broke slightly. I need to know, is this just me? Am I alone in this insanity? I could have lied. Should have lied. Instead, I showed her my sketches, page after page of her hands, her profile, her eyes. Evidence of my complete captivation. She studied them silently, fingers trembling slightly as she traced the pencil lines. You see me, she whispered finally. I can't stop seeing you. She kissed me then, and the world reorganized itself around that contact. Her lips were soft but insistent, tasting of mint and possibility. My hands tangled in her hair while hers gripped my waist, pulling me impossibly closer. We kissed like we were trying to compress a lifetime into a moment, desperate and tender and absolutely irreversible. When we finally broke apart, breathing hard, she pressed her forehead against mine. What are we doing? She asked. Ruining everything, I replied. Good, she said, and kissed me again. We didn't sleep together that night, though every atom in my body begged for it. Instead, we lay on my narrow bed fully clothed, talking until dawn painted the walls gold. She told me about the first time she knew she was gay, watching her female teacher conduct the youth orchestra, mesmerized by the grace and power in those movements. I confessed my own awakening, falling for my best friend at 17, the exquisite agony of unrequited desire that taught me to hide my heart. Have you been with many women? She asked, fingers tracing abstract patterns on my arm. A few. Nothing that lasted. I hesitated, then admitted, I tend to fall for the unavailable ones. My therapist would have a field day with this situation. She laughed, low and rueful. Mine actually did. Before I left Boston, I mentioned meeting you at the reception. She said, Sophia, please don't complicate your mother's professional relationships. Yet here we are. Here we are, I echoed, memorizing the weight of her against me, the rhythm of her breathing. Tell me about your ideal future, she requested. The one where everything works out exactly as you dream. I closed my eyes, conjuring images I'd never dared articulate. I finished my PhD, but instead of teaching, I work for a museum. Curating exhibitions that make people feel the way art makes me feel, less alone, more alive. I travel, tracking down forgotten pieces by women artists, giving them the recognition they deserve. And I paused, vulnerable. And I come home to someone who understands that my passion for art isn't competition for my affection. Someone who has their own consuming fire, so we can burn beside each other without consuming one another. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd fallen asleep. Then, I want to compose. Not just perform other people's emotions, but create my own. I want to write a symphony that makes people weep without understanding why. I want a house with a music room where sunlight streams through tall windows. And I want someone who listens to my unfinished pieces without judgment, who understands that creation is messy and vulnerable and necessary. Our futures hung between us, parallel lines that might never intersect beyond these stolen days. When morning fully arrived, she left reluctantly, needing to maintain the facade of normalcy. But first, she played me the piece she'd composed on my phone's voice recorder. It was us, the yearning, the impossibility, the stubborn hope despite everything. What will you call it? I asked. I don't know yet. Maybe I never will. Some things resist naming. Like what we were to each other. Not girlfriends, not lovers, not friends. Something indefinable and therefore infinite. Thursday was torture. Professor Harrison invited me to lunch with her and Sophia, wanting to discuss potential PhD programs where I might continue my studies. I sat across from them at the faculty dining room, watching their easy interaction, their shared mannerisms and humor. The resemblance was striking once you looked for it, the same determined chin, the same way of tilting their heads when thinking. Lucy's considering Yale, Professor Harrison told her daughter. They have an exceptional program in Renaissance studies. Yale's only 2 hours from Boston, Sophia observed, her tone carefully neutral though her eyes found mine with dangerous intensity. True, Professor Harrison agreed, oblivious to the undercurrents. You two could easily visit if Lucy ends up there. The irony was excruciating. Here was Professor Harrison unknowingly orchestrating a potential future for us, while I sat paralyzed by guilt and longing. I haven't decided yet, I managed. There are complications to consider. Sophia's foot found mine under the table, a secret comfort that only intensified my internal chaos. After lunch, Professor Harrison returned to her office while Sophia walked me to the library. Yale, she asked softly. I applied months ago before. Before, she agreed. Lucy, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. I nodded, bracing myself. If I weren't leaving tomorrow, if geography wasn't a factor, if my mother wasn't your professor, would you want to explore this? Really explore it. The question I'd been avoiding, presented with surgical precision. Yes, I admitted. But those factors do exist. We can't just wish them away. I know. She looked devastated and determined simultaneously. I just needed to hear it. That this isn't just proximity and forbidden fruit. That in another universe, we might have had a chance. In another universe, we're already together, I said, surprising myself with the certainty. She smiled through tears she wouldn't let fall. Tonight. The graduate student mixer. It's my last night, will you come? That's playing with fire. Everyone will be there, including your mother. I know. But I can't leave without one more evening, even if we have to pretend we're just acquaintances. Against every instinct for self-preservation, I agreed. The mixer was held in the department lounge, all dark wood and pretension. I arrived late, needing extra time to armor myself with professional distance. Sophia stood near the window talking to Dr. Williams from Medieval Studies, wearing a burgundy dress that made her skin glow. She saw me enter and smiled, polite, appropriate, nothing like the way she'd smiled while lying in my bed. I mingled determinately, discussing thesis chapters with fellow students, debating theoretical frameworks with professors. But I was hyper-aware of her location at every moment, like she was magnetic north and I was a broken compass spinning toward her. Professor Harrison appeared at my elbow during a lull. You seem different lately, she observed. More. I'm not sure. Intense. The thesis is consuming me, I deflected. She studied me with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Just remember, Lucy, the best scholarship comes from balance. Don't let passion for your subject overwhelm everything else. The irony of her advice made me want to laugh or cry or both. As the evening wore on, Sophia and I performed an elaborate dance of avoidance that was more intimate than any conversation. We orbited each other, never directly interacting, but always aware. Once, reaching for wine at the same moment, our fingers brushed. The contact lasted a millisecond, but felt like eternity. Finally, near midnight, she approached me directly. Professional smile, appropriate distance. Lucy, it was wonderful meeting you this week. Good luck with your thesis. Thank you. Safe travels back to Boston. We shook hands formally while our eyes said everything we couldn't. Her thumb stroked my palm once, secretly, before she let go. She left the party after that. I stayed another hour, maintaining appearances, discussing nothing while my heart relocated to Boston without my permission. I didn't expect to hear from her. We'd made no promises, exchanged no contact information beyond what was professionally necessary. But 3 days after she left, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I'm trying not to contact you. I'm failing. I stared at the message for 20 minutes before responding. I'm trying not to want you to contact me. Also failing. Thus began our dangerous correspondence. She'd text me photos of Boston, the harbor at sunrise, her cello in an empty concert hall, a bookstore window display featuring art history texts. I'd send her fragments of my thesis, passages that reminded me of her, photos of the paintings I was analyzing where every female figure somehow had her eyes. We were careful, so careful. Never speaking directly of feelings, never making plans. Just existing in each other's periphery, unable to fully disconnect. The first near miss came 3 weeks later. Professor Harrison asked me to retrieve a book from her home office, giving me her spare key with casual trust that felt like a knife between my ribs. It's the red leather volume on the 3rd shelf, she instructed. You can't miss it. Her house was elegant but warm, all hardwood floors and built-in bookshelves. I found the office easily, located the book immediately. I should have left then. Instead, I lingered, absorbing details of Professor Harrison's private life. Family photos lined the mantel, including several of Sophia at various ages. Sophia as a gap-toothed child holding a violin. Teenage Sophia, all rebellious angles and defiant eyes. Recent Sophia, radiant in her orchestra formal wear. I was studying that last photo when I heard the front door open. Mom? Sophia's voice called out. I came back early. She appeared in the doorway and froze. We stared at each other, the air evacuating from the room. Lucy? Confusion, joy, and panic cycled across her face. What are you? Your mother asked me to get a book. She's still at campus. I didn't know you were. Why are you here? Concert was canceled. Orchestra politics. She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. God, Lucy, look. Don't. But I was already moving toward her, pulled by forces beyond my control. We met in the center of the room, hands reaching but not quite touching, existing in that millimeter of space between contact and catastrophe. I've thought about you every day, she confessed. Every hour. It's pathological. I know. Me too. I ended things with Claire completely. Not that we were really together anymore, but any possibility. I couldn't pretend to want something I'd already found with you. Sophia, we can't. The front door opened again. Professor Harrison's voice, Sophia? I saw your car. We sprang apart, Sophia grabbing a random book while I clutched the one I'd come for like a shield. When Professor Harrison appeared in the doorway, we were a respectable distance apart, discussing Baroque musical interpretation with desperate conviction. Lucy. Professor Harrison's surprise seemed genuine. I didn't expect. You asked me to pick up the Bernini text, I reminded her, holding it up as evidence. Of course, I'd forgotten. How wonderful that you two ran into each other. She beamed at us both, clearly pleased. Sophia, why didn't you tell me you were coming? As they discussed the canceled concert, I edged toward the door. I should go. Thank you for the book, Professor. Stay for tea, Professor Harrison offered, but I was already fleeing. Another time, I called over my shoulder, not looking at Sophia, not trusting myself to maintain composure if our eyes met. I drove home shaking, adrenaline and frustrated desire making me reckless. My phone buzzed at a red light. Tomorrow. Old North Church, 3 p.m. Please. I shouldn't go. I knew I shouldn't go. I went. She was waiting in the last pew, hair hidden under a knit cap, looking younger and more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. I slid in beside her, maintaining careful distance. This is insane, I whispered. I know. Your mother is my advisor. My mentor. This could destroy my academic career. I know. You live in Boston. I live here. We're geographically impossible. I know. Then why? She turned to face me fully, and the raw emotion in her eyes stopped my litany of obstacles. Because I'm in love with you. Completely, irrationally, inconveniently in love with you. And I hope you feel the same. The church seemed to hold its breath. Dust motes suspended in colored light from stained glass windows. My heart hammering so loud I was sure she could hear it. I do, I admitted. God help me, I do. She released a breath that might have been a sob or a laugh. So, what do we do? I don't know. We sat in silence, surrounded by centuries of prayer and desperation, adding our own impossible wishes to the atmosphere. I'll be here for a week, she finally said. Mom thinks I'm staying with college friends. We could. No. The word hurt to say. Not like that. Not lying and sneaking. If we do this, when we do this, it has to be honest. She deserves that. We deserve that. You're right. She slumped against the pew. I hate that you're right. Your mother invited me to Thanksgiving, I said carefully. A group dinner for students who can't go home. I'll be there. Family tradition. She laughed bitterly. We're quite the pair, aren't we? Star-crossed doesn't begin to cover it. More like constellation-crossed. Entire galaxies between us. But her hand found mine between us on the pew, fingers interlacing with desperate pressure. I should tell her, Sophia said. About my feelings, at least. She deserves to know. She'll blame me. Think I pursued you, corrupted you somehow. You did corrupt me, Sophia said with a small smile. In the best possible way. We stayed in the church until closing, hands clasped, saying nothing and everything. When we finally left, walking in opposite directions, I felt like I was leaving pieces of myself behind with every step. The second near miss came at Thanksgiving. Professor Harrison's house overflowed with mismatched graduate students and junior faculty. The dining room table groaned under dishes everyone had contributed. I brought cranberry sauce made from my grandmother's recipe, trying to anchor myself in family tradition while my entire world tilted off axis. Sophia arrived late, windswept and laughing about traffic. She hugged her mother, greeted familiar faces, then saw me. The smile that bloomed across her face was quickly suppressed, but not before several people noticed. You two know each other? Dr. Peterson from Modern Studies asked. We met during my last visit, Sophia said smoothly. Lucy was kind enough to show me around campus. Through dinner, we sat at opposite ends of the table, but I felt her attention like sunlight. Every laugh, every gesture, every word she spoke seemed meant for me, even when addressed to others. I drank too much wine trying to dull the awareness, which only intensified it. After dinner, people scattered, some watching football, others helping with dishes, a few smoking on the back porch despite the cold. I escaped to the study, needing solitude to compose myself. But of course, she found me there, slipping in and closing the door. You're drunk, she observed, not unkindly. Slightly. It's the only way I could survive sitting 20 feet from you without spontaneously combusting. She laughed, soft and sad. Mom keeps asking if I'm seeing anyone. I don't know how much longer I can deflect. Tell her the truth. That you're in love with someone unavailable. Technically accurate. She moved closer, and I could smell her shampoo, lavender, and something earthy. Dance with me. There's no music. There's always music. She held out her hand. Against every screaming instinct of self-preservation, I took it. She pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine against her chest where I could feel her heartbeat, rapid and real. We swayed to phantom melodies only we could hear. This is dangerous, I murmured into her shoulder. Everything worth doing is. The door opened. We flew apart, but not fast enough. Dr. Williams stood in the doorway, eyes wide with surprise and something else, recognition? Understanding? Sorry, he said after a beat. Just looking for the bathroom. Down the hall, second door on the right, Sophia managed, voice impressively steady. He nodded and left, closing the door behind him. We stared at each other, reality crashing back. He saw, I said unnecessarily. He won't say anything. Michael's good people. He's also gay and understands complicated situations. But the spell was broken. The risk we were taking suddenly felt less romantic, more reckless. I should go, I said. Lucy, I can't do this. Not here, not in her house, surrounded by my colleagues. It's too much. I left without saying goodbye to anyone, including Professor Harrison. Later, I'd text her about sudden nausea, food poisoning, profound apologies. She'd be gracious and concerned, making my guilt exponentially worse. The third near miss almost ended everything. It was early December, snow falling thick and silent. I was in the library, supposedly researching, but actually staring at a text from Sophia, a photo of sheet music she'd composed titled Study in Longing, Opus 1. Ms. Anderson? I looked up to find Professor Harrison standing beside my Corel, wearing an expression I couldn't read. Professor Harrison. I didn't hear you approach. You seemed quite absorbed. She glanced at my phone, which I quickly turned face down. Might we speak privately? My blood turned to ice water. Of course. We walked to her office in silence, snow continuing to fall beyond tall windows, blanketing the world in deceptive peace. She closed the door and gestured for me to sit, but remained standing herself, never a good sign. Lucy, I need to ask you something, and I need complete honesty. The same word Sophia had used. Genetic similarity in even their confrontation style. Of course, I repeated, mouth desert dry. Is there something happening between you and my daughter? The directness of it stole my prepared deflections. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. What makes you? I'm not blind, Lucy. The way you two look at each other. The sudden increase in her visits. The fact that you fled my home on Thanksgiving the moment after she arrived. She sat down across from me, and her expression softened slightly. I'm not angry. Yet. But I need to understand what's happening. Truth or lies. Both seemed impossible. We've developed feelings for each other, I admitted, choosing the most clinical language possible. Nothing has happened. We both recognized the impossibility of the situation. She was quiet for a long moment, processing. When? When she visited in September. That first reception. I didn't mean for it to happen. Neither of us did. Feelings. She tested the word. That's rather vague. I met her gaze directly. I'm in love with her. And she reciprocates those feelings. The words hung between us like a confession in a courtroom. Professor Harrison's face cycled through emotions, surprise, concern, something that might have been understanding. I see. She leaned back in her chair, suddenly looking older. And what exactly do you plan to do about these feelings? Nothing. I graduate in May. She lives in Boston. We've accepted that it's impossible. Impossible. She repeated it thoughtfully. Lucy, do you know why I became an academic? The non sequitur threw me. Because you love Renaissance art? Because I fell in love with my married professor when I was 22. The admission landed like a thunderclap. Nothing happened. He was ethical. I was terrified, but the intensity of that feeling drove me into scholarship. I needed to understand how Bernini could capture ecstasy in marble, how Caravaggio could paint desire with light and shadow. Art became my way of processing emotions too large for my life to contain. I stared at her, this revelation recontextualizing everything I thought I knew. "So you understand," I whispered. "I understand the feeling. I also understand the cost." My situation resolved itself. He moved to another university. I found my own path. "But you and Sophia." She paused, choosing words carefully. "This is more complicated. You're my student. She's my daughter. The potential for harm is significant." "I know. God, I know. Why do you think we've stayed apart?" "But you haven't, not really. You're in contact, aren't you?" My silence was answer enough. "Lucy, I'm going to say something, and I need you to really hear it." She leaned forward, intensity sharpening her features. "I've watched my daughter sleepwalk through relationships for years. Safe choices, reasonable women who made sense on paper but never reached her core. Since September, she's been different. Alive in a way I haven't seen since she was young. I attributed it to career success, to growth. But it's you, isn't it?" I nodded, unable to speak. "I should be furious. Should forbid this, transfer you to another advisor, create distance." She stood, pacing to the window. "But I've spent my career studying passion, how it transforms, elevates, destroys. How can I condemn you for experiencing what I've spent decades analyzing?" "What are you saying?" She turned back to me. "I'm saying that after you graduate, after the academic relationship ends, what you and Sophia choose to do is your business. But until then, absolute professional boundaries. No visits, no secret meetings, minimal contact. Can you do that?" "Yes." The word came out strangled, but certain. 5 months, Lucy. Give me 5 months of professional distance, and then we'll see." I stood on shaking legs. "Professor Harrison, Katherine, thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This could still end badly for all of us." She returned to her desk, suddenly all business. "Now, about your thesis, chapter 4. We spent the next hour discussing my work as if the previous conversation hadn't happened. But when I left, she called after me. "Lucy, tell Sophia what we discussed. Tell her I understand more than she thinks." I texted Sophia immediately. "Your mother knows. We need to talk." She called within minutes. "What happened? Are you okay?" "Did she?" "She knows about our feelings. She's giving us terms." I explained the conversation, still processing it myself. Sophia was quiet for so long I thought the connection had dropped. Then, 5 months. 5 months. I can do that. Can you? I'll have to. "Lucy." Her voice broke slightly. "This means there's a future. A real possibility. Maybe. If we can survive the waiting. We'll survive. We have to." December passed in a blur of academic intensity. I threw myself into my thesis with desperate focus, needing the distraction. Professor Harrison and I maintained strict professionalism, though occasionally I'd catch her watching me with an expression of profound sympathy. Sophia and I reduced our contact to weekly texts, brief, careful, just enough to confirm we both still existed, still remembered, still waited. Each message was torture and lifeline simultaneously. 1 month down, she wrote on New Year's Eve. I was alone in my apartment, watching snow fall, imagining her at some Boston party, surrounded by people who could actually touch her. "For to go," I replied. January brought thesis panic and graduate school applications. Yale's acceptance arrived first, their Renaissance program offering full funding. The irony wasn't lost on me. The universe apparently had a sense of humor about placing me 2 hours from Boston. "Congratulations," Professor Harrison said when I told her. "It's an excellent program. You'll thrive there. It's also close to." "I'm aware." Her smile was knowing. Purely coincidental, I'm sure. February was the cruelest month, despite what Elliot claimed. Valentine's Day loomed like a personal insult. Sophia broke protocol to send a single musical note, middle C, sustained for exactly the duration of a heartbeat. I sent back a photo of Bernini's Ecstasy of Saint Teresa with no explanation needed. March arrived with spring rain and restlessness. My thesis defense was scheduled for early May, the finish line finally visible. I'd begun secretly apartment hunting in New Haven, allowing myself to imagine a future that included more than stolen moments and impossible longing. Then Sophia showed up at my door on a random Thursday night, soaked from rain, eyes wild. "I know we agreed to wait," she said in a rush. "I know there's still 2 months, but I couldn't, there was an accident." Not me, a colleague. She died. 28 years old, perfect health, stepped off a curb at the wrong moment and gone. Just gone. And all I could think was, what if that happened to one of us? What if we spend all this time being noble and patient and we never get the chance? I pulled her inside, out of the rain, into my arms. She was shaking, cold, fear, exhaustion, all contributing. "We're going to get our chance," I promised, holding her tight. 2 more months. We can do this. Can we? Because I feel like I'm losing my mind. I dream about you every night. I see your face in audiences when I perform. I've written an entire symphony inspired by the way you looked at me in that church. This isn't healthy, Lucy. No, I agreed. It's not. But it's real. And it's ours. And in 2 months. In 2 months, then what? We date like normal people? Pretend the last 8 months haven't been this exquisite torture? Act like your relationship with my mother isn't permanently altered by this. She was right, of course. There would be no normal for us, no easy transition from forbidden to accepted. I don't know, I admitted. But I know I'd rather have complicated with you than simple with anyone else. She kissed me then, desperate and salt-tinged with tears. We kissed like we were trying to store up enough contact to survive the remaining separation. When we finally broke apart, she pressed something into my hand, a USB drive. The symphony I mentioned. It's not finished, might never be. But it's yours. You're in every note. She left before I could respond, disappearing back into the rain. I listened to the symphony that night, all 43 minutes of unfinished brilliance. It was us, our meeting, our separation, our hope, our despair, all transformed into music that made my chest ache with recognition. April crawled by. I successfully defended my thesis, Professor Harrison leading the committee with perfect professional distance, while her eyes betrayed deeper knowledge. Afterward, she hugged me briefly. 1 more month, she whispered, and I wasn't sure if she was counting down to my graduation or to whatever came after. The final weeks accelerated and dragged simultaneously. I packed my apartment, attended farewell dinners, submitted final papers. Sophia and I maintained our distance, though the effort felt like holding my breath underwater, possible but increasingly painful. Then, finally, impossibly, graduation day. I sat in my cap and gown among hundreds of other graduates, searching the crowd for 2 faces. Professor Harrison was on stage with the other faculty. Sophia was somewhere in the audience. She texted only, "I'm here." When my name was called, when I walked across that stage and received my diploma, I felt a chapter ending and another beginning. Professor Harrison shook my hand formally, but her grip was firm, meaningful. "Congratulations, Dr. Anderson," she said, using my new title for the first time. "You've earned this." After the ceremony, in the chaos of families and photos and celebrations, I found them both by the ancient oak tree where everything had started. "So," Professor Harrison said, looking between us with an expression of resignation and something that might have been approval, "I suppose certain professional boundaries are no longer relevant." Sophia stepped toward me, tentative after so many months of forced distance. Hi. Professor Harrison sighed. "I'm going to leave you two to figure things out. But Lucy? Sophia? We're going to need to have some very honest conversations about how this proceeds. Family dinners are going to be interesting." She walked away, leaving us alone under the oak tree, spring leaves rustling above. So, Sophia said, I may have done something impulsive. What kind of impulsive? The kind where I accepted a position with the New Haven Symphony. Starting in September. My heart stopped, restarted, possibly exploded. You what? It's a good position. Principal cellist. Excellent conductor. Nothing to do with the fact that you'll be at Yale. Her smile was radiant, unguarded for the first time in months. Purely coincidental. Purely, I agreed, reaching for her hand. We stood there, fingers interlaced, no longer forbidden, not yet knowing what we were becoming. The future stretched before us, complicated and uncertain, but finally possible. What now? She asked. Now? Now we start. Just like that. No, not just like that. With family dinners that will require therapy to process. With your mother probably watching us like a hawk for years. With all the baggage of how we began. But yes, we start. She pulled me closer, and I could smell that familiar jasmine and sandalwood perfume, could feel the familiar electricity where our bodies touched. I love you, she said simply. I've loved you since that first reception, through every impossible month of separation. I'll love you through whatever comes next. I love you too. Obsessively. Irrationally. Completely. We kissed under the oak tree, in full view of anyone who cared to look, no longer hiding, no longer forbidden. It felt like coming home after the longest journey, like that first breath after nearly drowning, like every cliché about love that suddenly made perfect sense. Epilogue, 2 years later. I'm writing this from our apartment in New Haven, the one with the music room where morning light streams through tall windows exactly as Sophia imagined. She's practicing in there now, working on a new composition. The cello's voice carries through our space, rich and complex, telling stories without words. The first year was harder than we expected. Family dinners were excruciating initially, Katherine trying too hard to be supportive, Sophia and I overcompensating with professional distance, everyone dancing around the elephant in the room. It took 6 months before Katherine could refer to me as Sophia's girlfriend without visible discomfort. It took a year before she could joke about it. At least I know you have excellent taste in women, she told Sophia last Christmas, after several glasses of wine. Even if your methodology was questionable. We've found our rhythm now. I'm completing my postdoctoral work at Yale, researching forgotten women artists of the Baroque period. My first book comes out next spring, dedicated to S, who teaches me daily that beauty and truth are worth the risk. Sophia's symphony premiered last month with the New Haven Symphony. She didn't tell me she'd titled it September Recognition until I saw the program. I cried through the entire performance. We still have challenges. There are colleagues who whisper about how we met, relatives who don't understand, moments when the weight of our origin story feels too heavy to carry. But then Sophia will play something she's composed just for me, or I'll show her a painting that captures something ineffable about love, and we remember why we chose this. Last week, Katherine visited for a conference. Over dinner, she raised her glass and said, to complicated beginnings and beautiful presents. We all drank to that, understanding that some stories don't follow conventional paths, but arrive at truth nonetheless. Tonight, Sophia will finish practicing and emerge from the music room with that particular glow she gets after creating something new. We'll make dinner together, probably pasta with too much garlic, definitely with wine. We'll talk about our days, my research, her rehearsal, the ordinary miracles of a shared life. Later, we'll lie in bed and she'll trace patterns on my skin while I tell her about the painting I discovered in the university archives, how the artist's use of light reminded me of the way she looked that first night at the reception. Some obsessions fade with possession, lose their power once the forbidden becomes familiar. Not this one. If anything, the daily reality of Sophia has only intensified my captivation. I know now how she takes her coffee, too much sugar, never enough cream. I know she practices in old t-shirts that have more holes than fabric. I know she cries at documentary films about whales and laughs in her sleep and leaves notes in my books where she thinks a passage reminds her of us. I know the weight of her against me at 3 a.m. when nightmares wake her. I know the sound of her breathing when she's concentrating. I know the exact shade her eyes turn when she's about to kiss me. I know 1,000 small truths that have only made the large truth more overwhelming. I am completely, permanently, gratefully in love with this woman who was once my professor's daughter and is now simply mine. The music from the other room stops. I hear her footsteps approaching, that particular rhythm I'd recognize anywhere. She appears in the doorway, hair pulled back messily, wearing one of my old sweaters. I finished it, she says, meaning the piece she's been wrestling with for weeks. What's it called? She smiles, that same smile that undid me 2.5 years ago. The inevitable. And that's what we are, what we've always been despite the obstacles and impossibilities. Inevitable. Like gravity or symphonies or the way light bends around massive objects in space. We were always going to happen. It was just a matter of surviving the journey. She crosses to where I'm writing, reads over my shoulder. Is this about us? She asks. Everything I write is about us, in one way or another. Good, she says, and pulls me up from the desk. Now come listen to your song. I follow her to the music room, where the cello waits and afternoon light slants through windows and our future continues to unfold, measure by measure, note by note, one perfect, imperfect day at a time. The end.